Hello, David. Hey, Paul. Hello, Paul.
Gary, can you hear me?
I can.
Very good.
You're labeled with my name, of course.
Ah, yes. Oh, well,
Oh, that's fine. Glad we're able to get you on.
yes. Oh, how's life treating you?
Oh, all right. You know, it's tough, feeling a bit isolated.
Yeah, yeah,
Life's different.
it is. But I spent the afternoon trying to get my plow truck unstuck. So
Oh,
that
no.
was a bit frantic, but
Uh-huh. Was it on your property or were you out?
oh, yes. It
Oh.
was, I was just coming up I have a steep hill up to my dooryard. And most of the time I can, if it's not too much snow, I can plow up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd already plowed and I was just sort of getting it as far off as possible and ended up in the ditch. So,
Oh, boy. Were you able to winch it out or did you need some help?
my brother-in-law came over and pulled me out. So,
Good. Yeah, it was
Oh.
pretty thick.
Yes, it was. Just a minute, I have to open up a container of rice for my wife.
Okay. So, Paul, I was able to find some costs for doing the PCR testing, and
Yep.
it was out of a lab in Miami, Florida. I think it's probably the same one that
Yeah.
you would use some time back. I just finally found it this evening, and it was from like 2016 or 2017, and it's roughly $250 or so a sample, but the costs go down if you've got more samples.
Yes, and the getting them down there overnight is costly as well. So,
Yeah, I think you have to be really smart about doing it in terms of the kind of information that it can give you and can't give you, and whether you're getting it in the right time at the right
Hey, everybody.
time it's going to show up, and just how representative it is.
yes.
Hi, Lise.
Hi there.
This Tandy. Hi, Tandy.
Hello,
Hi,
Susan.
Andy.
Hi, Tandy.
Guys, coming. We saw robins.
You
Oh,
did.
my.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Is it spring?
Well, it's coming. We had robins. Isn't that a good sign?
Yes.
I thought so too. I was so excited.
But don't they spend the winter here?
They do.
They're just waking up.
Sit in the barn and keep their heads warm.
Well, they're out flying around between the trees now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a warm day.
I know. God bless.
Lovely.
The warmest in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And beautiful. Well, how is
Hi,
everyone?
Paul.
Hello, Lise. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I see your wife running early in the morning.
Yes.
I am impressed. I am very impressed.
Paul, does she start out at your place or does she go down to the bottom of the hill?
Oh, no, she runs up and down the mountain.
Boy. That is impressive.
She's a going woman.
That's one of the steepest, longest hills around. My
Well,
bicycle.
it's
It
not one of the
is.
longest.
Well, that's impressive.
It is impressive. It's totally impressive. So I wave at her just internally because I see her out the window.
Oh, hi. Hi, Whitney. How are you? Hi, Tony.
Hi, Whitney.
Hello,
Hi,
ladies.
Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Hello.
Hi, Rich.
Hi, Whitney.
Rich, have we heard anything from Jay? Any words from Jay?
Not yet.
Right.
No.
Paul,
Well-
this is about moorings and stuff.
Mhm.
It's gonna be very interesting.
Yeah.
Controversial.
I don't know if you saw the note that I sent out a couple hours ago, but I wanted to change up the sequence of the meeting a little bit.
No.
And even before we review the minutes, be able to engage Paul on the boating issue.
Good.
And, I think we could devote up to a half an hour or so to that discussion. And Paul, I think what we're interested in hearing about is sort of what is the regulatory scheme for boating regulations, both operations, mooring, that kind of thing, in terms of state authorities, local authorities, that kind of thing, and how much ability localities have to regulate requirements that may be more stringent than what the state requirements might be, and then also how enforcement works, both on paper and practically.
Practically, yes.
For the lakes, right?
No.
Well, I will, I didn't organize remarks, but I think I'll start first on boat operation.
First
And,
of all, Paul,
yep.
just let me have everyone introduce themselves so you know who's here. And this was a topic that Susan in particular wanted to hear about, and I'd like her to be able to add a few words if she'd like to.
Thank you, Paul, for joining us. And the concern was, do we even know what the laws are that govern our lakes and ponds, especially regarding speed limits and wakes and the any protection around the shoreline?
Okay, well, we can start with that. I'm just writing that down so I can remember. Operation of boats on the lakes and ponds is primarily governed by the state through the Maine Warden Service. Having said that, towns have traditionally, if you look through the law book, you'll see that a number of ponds have horsepower limits or no motorized boats, that sort of thing. And what that process is the town's petition, and the legislature has to pass that as a law, essentially, and then it goes into the law book. So
Which
limits on
legislature?
horsepower.
The town legislature
No, state.
No, the state legislature
has to
has to
the
pass a
town.
law saying that pond X can only
Okay.
have 10 horsepower
Okay.
and lower below engines, that sort of thing. In terms of speed limits, within 200 feet of the shore, they call it the state calls it officially the safety zone. Another way to think about it is what a lot of people call it is the no wake zone. So from the shoreline out to 200 feet, boats are only supposed to operate at headway speed only, essentially, trolling speed or a little faster than that within that area. The exceptions to that is if you're starting a water skier off or dropping a water skier back off at a float or a dock, you can come in, but you have to try to come in at a perpendicular angle and then turn back around.
What's a headway speed?
Headway speed is essentially you're not making any wake. You're operating the boat in such a manner that you can steer it that it's not just drifting with the wind and the waves. But you're not going any faster than that. So as long as you can steer your boat and operate it, that's as fast as you're supposed to be going within that 200-foot zone.
I
So
have,
no
Now,
zooming.
I have a question, Paul, excuse me, 200 feet from, this is Tony Opersdorf, and I'm taking
Yep.
it. So 200 feet from shore, what, does that apply if there's an island?
yes, it does.
Okay.
And so I think anybody who spent any time on McGonagall or Norton's Pond, I haven't been on Coleman or some of these others during boating season very much, or Pitcher. But the ones that I'm very familiar with, that particular state law of operating at headway speed only within 200 feet of the shore is universally ignored.
Right.
And it's pretty rare that wardens will typically warn people when they're doing something egregious very close to shore. But with a lot of these ponds, they're so convoluted and so skinny that you end up with pretty much very little room to operate at speed, because once you take 200 feet from one shore, 200 feet from the other shore, there may not be much room left in the middle for people to go at a speed they want to go at. Having said that, every year they do write some tickets for that. In my experience, I haven't heard them writing a ticket on any of our lakes and ponds in many years for that sort of activity. So that speed limit and wakes are, that's in terms of wakes, they also have some laws about operating vessels in an unsafe manner. And one of those is causing a wake that is causing erosion to the shoreline or property damage to people's floats and docks. And again, I I may get in trouble with the warden service on this, but I have not seen them enforcing that on a regular basis. And at least on the ponds that we have around here, people in the past have complained to me or the warden service about large wakes on, for instance, Norton Pond. And they said basically, you know, if you can document that it's damaged your ramp or your float or something like that, then we'll come down and deal with it. But nothing's ever come with it. So that
Hard to
is,
prove.
yes, it's hard to prove, exactly.
Mhm.
And but so we have the but speed limits outside that safety zone in Maine. The only thing that can they can really get people for is operating in an unsafe manner or imprudent speed. And so that's it on the boating side. Anybody have any?
Yes, I do have a question. So short of enforcing this with tickets by the Maine Warden Service, what could a property owner do? Is it permissible to put out buoys at 200 feet, putting up signs that say no wake zone, toggling the buoys? What can someone do?
I don't believe there's any current regulations right now. Well, let me step back on that. putting out the Clorox bottle, so to speak, on a clothesline with a cinder block
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Technically, the state has to approve of where any buoys are, and the buoys have to be regulation buoys. And I think you folks have all seen them. They're the white cylinders, and they'll have various symbols on it for either no wake zone or rocks ahead or a channel marker or something like that. In practice, again, I talked last spring with the Department of Conservation, because someone on McGonagall in Lincolnville wanted to put some buoys out on some rocks right around his dock so he wouldn't hit the rocks when he came in to his dock. And he was going to buy the actual regulation buoys. And after we went round and round on the process to do that, and the state finally just said, well, why didn't he just put some gallon jugs out there, and
Right.
Yes.
it'll be good enough for him. So,
Uh-huh.
but no wake zones. You see them on the McGonagall Watershed Association actually puts the buoys out on Norton and McGonagall. And if you go around on both Norton and McGonagall, you'll see going typically in passages between islands and stuff where it's gets skinny. We'll put a no wake zone buoys on either end of those areas. For instance, if you go under the Bailey Bridge from McGonagall into Norton Pond, there's one before you go in under the bridge, and then you come back around into the main body of Norton Pond, and there's another buoy right there indicating it's a no wake zone. But again, having said that, in practice, the state usually doesn't get too excited about people putting out their own buoys. I think, obviously it's just like anything else. If everybody started doing it, then they'd probably have to respond. But if there's a few well-chosen no homemade, no wake zone, 200-foot safety zone buoys, I don't think the state would get too excited about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions about operating laws before I get into the mooring stuff, which is Lise and Richard know is a little more complicated, but yes, Whitney.
Yeah, Coleman Pond puts out their own, just fishermen who are kind-hearted put them on. I mean, it's pretty obvious where it's shallow and where there are rocks. And we've never had any, and they're gallon jugs, and nobody's ever complained about it. No markings on them. They're just hanging out there.
Yeah, it's the reason they have the regulations the way they do is they don't want, for one thing, they typically don't mark rocks within that safety zone, that 200-foot safety zone. The state, as a practice all over the state, because one, you're supposed to be going slow in that safety zone. And two, as they said, they'd need millions of buoys because once you get into the shallow water close to shore, there's all sorts of rocks that are hazardous to navigation. So typically they'll only put their regulation rock buoys out, out within past 200 feet from the shore. And I can think of two of them on McGonagall, Teal Rock, just down from my camp. It's out in the middle of the lake, and it's a shallow, so they put one there. And then right before you go into Cheney's Narrows, there's another rock there that they put a regulation rock buoy on. So yes, a lot of people will put those buoys out within, as they approach into a channel or towards their dock or something like that. And as you say, no one, most everybody understands what it is. They get concerned about liability if people are, putting out something and someone hits. So there's a buoy on this rock, but here's a rock right here, and someone hits this rock because no one put a buoy on it. So that's a concern that the state has with a proliferation of those gallon jugs, if you will. So that is that in terms of moorings. And Richard, Elise, feel free to jump in if I'm forgetting something or anything like that, because we've been round and round on this. I'll give you folks a little bit of a background. Originally, someone came to the selectmen in Lincolnville and said, non-shoreland owners are putting in moorings over in Camden. You guys better do something about it before it goes crazy in Lincolnville. And so Lincolnville put in a moratorium and started a ad hoc committee, I believe it is, to look at possible regulations. The moratorium was raised in Camden. It was ultimately voted down, but they put together another committee, and I was on that committee, and I sit in with the folks in Lincolnville, and so we taught ourselves about what regulations there are, what laws there are, what towns can and cannot do, that sort of thing. Absent any town regulations, moorings are regulated by the state. You have to have a white mooring ball with a blue stripe on it. You have to have your name and contact information on it. And and you have to have adequate ground tackle for that mooring to hold what size boat you're planning on it. The moorings follow boats. They don't necessarily follow people. So as you go along, but again, absent any town regulations, anybody is allowed to place a mooring within that safety zone that I discussed earlier, within 200 feet of the shore, and moor their boat there. They don't have to tell anybody. They don't have to inform the town, that sort of thing. They can put it pretty much wherever they please within that safety zone. So that is the current state of affairs. One other thing that comes into play is you have, and I'm not going to go into the what Title 38 or what particular law applies to what. I'll try to keep it more of a just describing what's going on. The harbor master law also enters into this, because if the town has a inland harbor master, and typically they need to be certified, go to a class, that sort of thing. The harbor master then has the power to look at moorings and decide whether they're in a safe place or not, and tell the owner to move them or, get them out of the way. And if they don't do that, then they actually can move them themselves. So an inland harbor master in and of itself actually wields a fair amount of power in terms of deciding where moorings should go. One other thing in terms of currently where they can and cannot go, as I said, the safety zone is 200 feet offshore. However, if you're in a cove, for instance, and it's 500 feet across, then what they do is they say, okay, you can only, the middle third of that distance has to be a throughway, a channel, and you can't put moorings in there. So in skinny places like coves or between islands or something like that, it's no longer 200 feet from shore. It's you measure the distance from shore to shore, and you divide it up into thirds, and that's on the two sides they can put moorings, but they can't. They have to maintain that passageway.
And that only applies to moorings, not boat operations?
Correct. That's only, this is, now I'm talking about putting out a mooring and securing your boat to it and leaving it there unattended. So.
And Paul, moorings can be for swim floats as well as for boats, right?
Correct.
Mm.
And again, they can only be in that safety zone as designated. So, so if a town has an inland harbor master, he can, and for instance, someone puts a mooring very close to someone else's mooring, he can go, that's too close, you're going to have to move it. You're going to have to move it over here. Or he could even conceivably say, it's way too busy right here. There's a lot of boats coming and going. You're going to have to move it down the lake a little ways to a quieter spot and put your mooring in there. So, but a town can pass regulations, ordinances that regulate moorings. And from discussing things at the Camden side of this with their attorney, he was of the opinion that the town could designate mooring fields, geographic areas where moorings could be, and not have them in other areas, and also look at how many moorings could be in that area, and then create a waiting list if you had more people that wanted moorings than you felt could safely be put in there, that sort of thing. And in the case of Camden, what they decided was they now have an inland harbor master, which also actually is Dale Doherty, our lake warden for the McGonagall Watershed Association. And he went to the course and took the course and got certified and all that. So he now is Camden's inland harbor master and has been dealing with it, but Camden decided not to try to put an ordinance through. So currently Dale's sort of operating just on the power he gets from the state as an inland harbor master. And so to a certain extent, I would say Camden's a little betwixt and between on that. As the moorings, the number of non-shoreland moorings continue to grow at both Bog Bridge and over by the Route 52 boat ramp there. So, Rich or Lise, have anything to add on that?
Well, you're working, are you not working on an ordinance?
For Camden?
Yeah. Or have they given it up?
Currently, no. I think reasonably speaking, the next step for people that want an ordinance in Camden will most likely be going out and get signatures and trying to get it on the town meeting warrant.
Okay. Oh dear. All right.
Paul, I would just say that's a good description. Appreciate it. I'm expecting we're going to talk a little later in our agenda a little more about what our committee's doing for
Yep.
Lincoln.
Well, it's see what
It
what
would be
the-
nice if Lincolnville and Camden had the same ordinance.
Not gonna happen.
yes, but it's
Doesn't
not.
look likely though.
But it's not necessarily. I think it will. You want to make sure that it's tailored to what the people in your town want, though. I mean, it's because there's some big open parts of McGonagall that are in Lincolnville, but other than that, there's the rest of the lakes and ponds in Lincolnville are pretty tiny, and I don't know what. I guess I have a question for you folks. On Pitcher, on Coleman last year, did you guys see an increase in boating?
On Coleman.
Coleman, go ahead.
on
All our
Col-
lakes did.
Go
we
ahead.
Everybody.
Go
Yeah,
ahead,
we did
Rich.
a survey, Paul, and on all the lakes in terms of, looking at the floats and the docks.
Yep.
And the increase this past summer was tremendous.
Yep. Whitney, how about Coleman?
I think we've had fewer boats than I've seen in the past years. Although when you did the dock survey, Tony?
I'd say fewer motorboats and as many, if not, this is off the cuff.
Yeah.
More canoes, paddle boats, canoes, kayaks, paddleboards,
Yep.
small sailboats, possibly more swimmers, but the number of, and quite a few small, low speed fishing boats, which are
Basically,
kind of the equivalent of a canoe, but
Mhm.
the tubers and the water skiers, there's maybe 3 boats, and when they're there, they're very there, but they don't seem to be increasing in number.
Mm-hmm.
no, they're not.
Candy, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I agree. We have about 3 boats that pull tubes and water skiers. But the Coleman Pond is really pretty quiet.
And they get bored too because it's so narrow. They go up and back and then it's boring.
One difference between Coleman and Pitcher is that Pitcher does have public access and
Yeah.
Coleman doesn't. So it'd be
Yeah.
hard to increase the number of boats on Coleman just because they couldn't get in.
Right.
Has
right.
Pitcher increased? Have the number of boats on Pitcher increased?
Yes, and I brought up our survey. Didn't Coleman Pond have an increase in floats and docks this past summer?
I thought they were less.
There were actually fewer. I think Norton and McGuntacook had a big increase.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. We did too in Pitcher.
and Pitcher, but not
Not
Coleman,
Coleman. Okay, my mistake.
not
Coleman.
Moody, and not Levenseller.
Okay.
Well, we run the Watershed Stewards project where we hire area students and train them up on water quality and a number of things and invasive plant identification. And they also man the 3 boat ramps on McGonagall and Norton and do the courtesy boat inspections to try to keep invasive plants out. And last year we had a 46% increase in inspections from the year before. And but I agree with you. A lot of that increase is personal powered craft, kayaks, stand-up paddle boards, canoes, stuff like that. But still, there's quite a big increase in the motorized traffic as well. So, and to a certain extent, that's driving the mooring issue as well, because, for instance, someone will be up renting a house for a week, but it's not on the lake, and they'll trailer their boat up, put it in at Bog Bridge, and toss the gallon jug overboard with a little anchor and leave the boat in there for the week, kind of thing. And hopefully it doesn't drift around and run into all the other boats, which we had a couple of instances of last year. So, but yeah, there's quite a bit more use on, if there's a public boat ramp and it's of any size. So in terms of parking and stuff like that, there's quite a bit of increase around here. I'll be interested this next summer to see, I'm going to go and anecdotally look, on busy weekends when we are very busy, and people are parking along the sides of the road and that sort of thing with their, after they put their boats in. I'm going to go to St. George and Damascotta Lake and Sheepscot and stuff like that and see if those are places are experiencing the same level. And because if there's space at those boat ramps, then there's nothing that says Camden can't say once the lot's full, the lot's full. So
the other thing that's happening during these COVID times is there appears to be a lot more ice fishing on all of the lakes. I know on Moody Pond, on Levenseller, and when I've driven around it all to other lakes and other areas, it seems like there are just lots and lots of ice fishers. I don't know if that's been the case on McGuntacook or not, but elsewhere.
they're there. To be honest, I have not noticed a big increase in ice fishing on McGuntacook, or I guess I drive by Moody pretty much every day, and that's always a very busy place because they stock that with trout many times in the fall, and so people just line right up to go get those
there were
guys.
1 or 2 weekends that there were 8 or 9 trucks, but in the past month or so, not. Maybe 2 or 3 trucks.
Right.
So
I've always felt
it's back
that's
to normal. It was big for a while, for a couple of weeks, but now it's normal.
I think the amount of trout left in Moody Pond may have something to do with that.
Yeah.
And
I know. I
Coleman,
mean, you talk to people and pickerel's coming up.
Yes.
and Coleman, we've had only one group, I think, Tandy, down near you with a tent,
Yes.
and that's it. On
Well,
our,
because there's no access, my dear.
no, but we usually had a lot more.
Uh,
And ice houses there. It's unusually quiet.
I've caught some really big bass in Coleman Pond.
Right.
Good for you.
So I have one question, Paul. I've
Yes.
never, I guess only once, we've been on Coleman for what, almost 40 years? And we've only once seen state warden service come in and at 100 miles an hour and almost knocked us over. Grandson.
Is he coming in on a vehicle? How are they coming in?
Out of a boat.
Out of a boat, and they were rushing through, and someone must have let them in.
I think that's the only time that we've seen the warden on the pond.
And so my question, we have in the past called up Justin Twitchell when there were boats who were misbehaving and going into the no wake zone and doing donuts, and he's been great. Should we call Justin? Is he still on duty, or is it Dale?
You can, I would call Justin because Justin is employed by the town of Lincolnville as inland harbor master.
Oh, he is?
And yes,
Okay. I
so
didn't know that.
you can call Dale as well. But Dale and Justin communicate. So if, Justin's out of town someplace or something like that, then Dale can come over or the other way around. But I would think your first call would be to Justin on that.
Okay,
So,
great. I'm glad to
yep.
know that because I've been confused for a number of years. He used to be your lake warden.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's why we called him. And then I really didn't know what we were supposed to do now.
Well,
He's very good, Justin
Yep.
is.
when he worked for the Watershed Association, he was also the inland harbor master for Lincolnville. And when he retired from our position, he kept that for Lincolnville there. So you guys have had that since then. So that works pretty well. So
Good. Well, that's good. I think I should.
Susan, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Is there any regulation at all, Paul, on the size of a motor horsepower or the displacement of a boat?
To my knowledge, there's no, unless the legislature passes a law for a horsepower limit, you can have as big of a boat and as big of an engine as you can get into the pond. The only, as I said, they don't have any preset regulations in terms of horsepower or size of a boat. So, one other thing that I want to bring up that we haven't talked about is houseboats, and you can see in a number of some of the larger lakes around Maine, there's a new way of making money. And what people are doing are putting houseboats out and then renting them like an Airbnb or a VRBO kind of deal. And I'm very concerned about that for the environmental problems, because there's no pump out facilities on any of these ponds we have or lakes around here. So that's an issue. And just the fact that if someone's spending a week on a boat, it's, just because the little instruction sheet says do this, that, and the other thing doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do it. That's the one big problem I have with that kind of thing. And the other one is the potential for interpersonal conflict. I know up on Rangeley Lake, what one company that has these does is basically someone will say, I want the boat over in this cove. And so they take the houseboat over there, anchor it in that cove. And then when the people get there, they ferry them out to their houseboat. And just the thought of coming to your camp and, looking across the cove and there's a houseboat there and the 5 college fraternity brothers have just graduated and want to spend a week on the pond. Interpersonal conflict is it could be a major thing with that, as it is with non-shorefront owner moorings too. By and large, moorings with people that have camps, everybody sort of works that out. Occasionally people have disagreements, but there's a strange mooring out very close to your camp or something like that. People are going to take exception to it. So that's the last thing. That's the other thing about moorings and regulations that I think is concerning. So,
is there a way of specifically regulating against that sort of thing? Are there authorities that towns have to do that? Or would it have to be folded into a general mooring ordinance of some
I
kind.
don't know if it necessarily would have to be folded into a general mooring ordinance. I mean,
A lot of
Lots of-
towns have ordinances that prohibit houseboats.
yep. The key on that, Gary, is defining houseboat.
Mhm.
And it's tough, and there's litigation right now with I think it's over on the Kennebec, where they have a regulation against houseboats and defined houseboats, and the person built the thing in such a manner to say, well, this isn't a houseboat. And so they're going through courts on that sort of thing. But one other thing that I was talking about over in Camden was not necessarily banning houseboats, but banning overnight stays on vessels.
Mhm.
And that sort of, then because vessel is defined in Maine statute, and pretty much anything that floats. And again, it's as we started this conversation, I was telling you about all sorts of things that the state has laws and regulations for, and that by and large, a lot of it's ignored unless, there's a big problem. And that, again, could be the same kind of thing. It's when I was a kid, we'd go and sleep in the bottom of the boat and drift down the middle of the lake. It was quite less busy than it is these days, but just sort of bump up against the shoreline in the morning and where am I? But I don't want to legislate out having kids enjoy themselves. If they want to go sleep down in the boat or on the dock or something, that it's not a big deal. But having the Airbnb kind of thing does frankly scare me. So
That was the scheme for Levenseller, and
yes,
Lincolnville ended it. So they were pioneers.
yes, ahead of their time.
Right. Any other questions for Paul?
Thank you, Paul.
very much. We really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
putting the time in. And also we want to thank you for the great work that you do with the ponds during the summer too, and helping us with our monitoring. That's just a really important checkpoint for all of us. And it's just wonderful to have you working with us. Thank you.
Very good. Well, you guys have a good evening. I'm going to go have some supper.
Okay.
Good idea.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Paul.
That was great. Thank you, whoever arranged that.
I think that Lise made the initial contact.
He's a good man and he comes through.
Yes,
No, he does.
That's what does it.
He's really devoted to the lakes, and he knows so
He
much.
sure is. And he
for a
knows
a
things.
long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the business that he's in professionally too, as an aquatic biologist and
Mm-hmm.
lake and aquatic management issues.
He
He's
cares.
a great resource.
Mm-hmm. We're lucky.
Well, shall we move to the minutes from our last meeting?
sure.
And Tony did send them out a couple days ago for us to take a look at. For the second time, he sent them out right after the meeting as well.
Well, I actually, excuse me, Gary, I have a question. Do we like that, sending them out a day or, when I get to them after the meeting, and again, a day or two before the meeting?
That's right.
Probably good.
I do,
I
yeah.
think it's a great way if it's not too much for you.
No, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
If I forget someone, I know someone who will remind me.
Oh, good.
Our vice chair.
Yes,
Sure.
poor Tony. I
I
don't
appreciate the
forget.
extra notes too in the minutes, a little research there under the diameter of the reeds.
What?
Your research on the diameter of the reeds.
Oh, I've forgotten that, yes.
Yes.
Well, no. Corrections?
Well, I had a couple, but you've got them.
I've got them in already. Anybody else have?
So
Yeah,
there was just one sentence at the end of update on mooring committee that just needs a little restructuring.
Okay.
It's the one that says a major issue are the rights of shoreland resident not to have a mooring field. So this is just some subject verb agreement issues.
I have a couple.
Can you
comments.
read that, Gary? Can you read what
Yes.
was said?
The sentence says a major issue are the rights of shoreland resident not to have a mooring field in front of their property.
I think we shouldn't say that.
Well, we just take it right out. That takes care of it.
Yeah, that makes it easy.
Yeah,
Easy.
I had some.
There's no
corrections.
R or is, it's just gone.
Take the whole
Okay,
sentence
good.
out.
All right.
That's my kind of correction. Okay.
I have some corrections I'd like to suggest.
It's the question of what is the meaning of it is, right? Or something.
We've heard that before.
Flashbacks, we're having flashbacks now.
So Tony, I have a couple comments about that same paragraph, mooring committee. Okay,
Yeah.
that first sentence, I'd like you to strike another attorney from another town. And where it starts from, if you would put,
Excuse me, wait, strike another attorney from another town,
yes.
okay?
And instead, would you put from Paul Leeper regarding Camden's plans? If that's in agreement with others. And in the last sentence,
Who's that?
uh,
Who is that?
Okay,
Who made that
Tony?
noise?
the last sentence, where it goes, the fundamental issue seems to be whether, instead of to designate a designated common mooring area, if you could change that to whether to have a designated mooring area, cross out common. And then the rest versus a moor anywhere approach in order to protect the rights of shorefront owners and provide safety for recreating on town lakes.
Well, what are the rights of shore owners? I mean, we're not quite sure. Maybe it should just be concerns of shore owners, because I'm not sure shore owners have any rights.
Sound like it?
they have privilege.
Well,
They have ownership of land, but
an ordinance is to give them rights, and that's what we're trying to do.
well, maybe we should be careful about using the word rights.
Mhm.
How would you want us to word that?
Interest,
I'm ashamed to say that I didn't look at the minutes.
I would say interest.
Yeah, interest is good.
Yeah,
Okay.
interest, good. That's
The
vague.
interest of- Yeah, that sounds good. Good.
I like that.
So do you
So-
want to just run over the sentence once again, Rich, for Tony's sake?
Yeah.
Sure. The fundamental issue seems to be whether to have a designated mooring area versus a moor anywhere approach in order to protect the interests of shorefront owners and provide safety for recreating on town lakes.
Sounds good.
Maybe reverse the order, provide safety on town lakes and respect the,
So we have, on Rich's version, we have shoreland at the very end of the sentence, of shoreline owners and provide what?
Safety for recreating on town lakes.
Safety.
There is a safety issue here, you know, that's been brought up in terms of, you know, if people are putting moorings, you know, wherever they want, and what that might do for, you know, creating hazards. So it is a safety issue.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we've agreed on that, but Lise doesn't like it.
I'm ashamed to say I'm very bad, but I didn't read the minute. But I should have.
You
Okay.
don't get a vote.
Can we leave it as is?
Fine.
Okay.
Okay,
If everyone else is happy, if Rich is happy, because Rich knows the problems.
he's the high water mark, okay, on this. So
Yeah.
what,
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
other corrections?
No, I thought they looked good. Looked
No,
great,
looked good,
Tony.
sure.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
So let's go around on the lakes and ponds. We don't have Steve with us for Norton Pond. I guess the only thing that I'd note for Norton Pond would be the lawnmower races that
Oh, yes.
really drew a lot of people. I don't know if you drove by during the 2 times that that they had the races. There were cars that were parked all up and down Norton Pond Road, parking areas all along 52 as well. It was a popular event.
were there any blown engines and oil on the ice?
Nope.
You know, I wasn't there. I just drove past. That's a good question as to whether or not they do have provisions for cleaning up oil if there are oil spills.
Yeah, they did have buckets and sand and
Okay.
I always call it vomit sorb, but that stuff. The whole thing was hysterical, especially this last weekend. There were so many people and these huge guys on their lawnmowers and the ridiculous sound they made as they were going around. I found it highly entertaining. And I don't like noise, but it was silly. It was
Is
just
that a
silly.
little rink they made that they were going around and around on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and there was great big guys on their souped up lawnmowers, and it was just asinine and perfect. I just loved it. And a big crowd, especially this last time.
But a pickup
Just
truck
felt-
out there too.
Pickup trucks on the.
Yeah, there were a lot of people. There was a lot of people. We could have sold hot dogs and cocoa and made a ton of money out there.
How about Lake McGuntacook? Any
Not
observ-
nearly as sociable. Jack and I walked out to Fang on Sunday, that glorious day, and there were 2 of the couples, one walking and one skiing. We didn't know what to expect. Sometimes we come around Fang, and between Fang and Crane, there can be a large party going on, bonfires and beer cans. There's no sign of activity. I guess everybody's gone to Norton. Not much social life on McGuntacook, but good ice and snow.
Greta and I went cross-country skiing around Young's Neck, and it was really a nice experience. There
Yeah.
were eagles there and some red-tailed hawks flying over, a few ice fishermen. Not much else. Okay, Coleman Pond.
Well, there are 4 fat tire bicyclers. 2 of those are our family.
Mhm.
So there's a little bicycle activity. And there are very few snowmobiles, which makes me wonder if the entrance, if they've, what is it, the goats, or what are they called? Who are supposed
Lincolnville goats.
Thank you, Pat. Lincolnville goats, if they have made paths into
They are. It's
Coleman
open.
and out.
Maureen said it was open.
Well, we have seen very few snowmobiles rushing through Coleman Pond. There are one or two on the pond that go quite slowly. So I thought maybe that the snowmobile trails weren't as open as they have been in the past.
You know, I think that may be the case, Whitney. I went cross-country skiing onto Coleman Pond, starting by the quarry on Liz Hand's property where the snowmobile comes through. And there's a fence across that, and there's also a tree down across that
Okay,
access road. So I actually saw some snowmobile tracks that came across Coleman, went up to that point, but didn't continue on because the trail was blocked. So there's, I think, nothing coming in from that side, or at least there wasn't as of about a week and a half ago.
I haven't seen a lot in Moody either. Not a lot of snowmobiles.
So that explains why they're all on Pitcher
Yeah.
Pond, because there's been a lot on Pitcher Pond, especially really early in the morning, which
Oh.
I don't
Wakes you
quite
up.
understand.
Wakes you up.
Yeah, but more the last couple weeks than I can remember in the last few
Really?
years.
Really?
Just a lot of zipping around.
More snow
Yeah.
over there.
I don't know. There's no tree down. There's no fence. They can get in.
so we had one ATV period. And you must have been one of the few cross-country skiers. Did you ski in front of our house?
I did on a couple different occasions,
Okay,
usually out closer to the island
okay.
than right, and once right in front of your house.
It seems
Yeah.
much quieter this year than last year on Coleman Pond.
You think it's a lot quieter too. It's really quiet.
Yes. I remember seeing ice skaters last year and a lot of snowmobile races down at the end of the pond from me. I haven't seen any of that this year.
Yeah.
I had one one night at 12:15 a.m. Happened to get up and look out the window, and it was a moonlight-filled evening, and I was enjoying the shadow of the pines on the ice, and what should walk by less than 10 feet from the dock with 4 deer in the moonlight. It was just a lovely, lovely scene. You know, they're there. I have had in the past years pictures of them when I put a camera on the dock, but I've never actually seen them with my own eyes. That was it was just nice.
Nice.
Coyote.
When I was out skiing on Coleman, there were lots of tracks because it was great tracking snow. And there were tracks of fox, coyote, and raccoon as well.
Yeah, we had one morning around 10 or 11 in the morning, we had, let's see, it's southwest of our house, halfway across the pond, an enormous coyote sitting on the ice, getting up and then trotting along and then sitting down and looking and sitting and getting up. And it was a beautiful viewing. It was a coyote that I think is the same one that has been in the photographs.
75% wolf.
Well, I don't know it has wolf, but it looks like a blonde and brown German Shepherd. It's an absolutely huge, beautiful animal.
Gorgeous.
You mean
That was one of the ones that Corlin posted on the bulletin board that was really light tan colored. Yeah.
Right. Right. I didn't want to mention her name because I don't think the
Okay.
location is.
Mhm.
That's
Well,
the
then
one.
don't put it in the minutes.
So that's it for Coleman.
Okay. How about Moody Pond, please?
Well, a lot of fishermen there, but not as many as last month, I wouldn't say, because then there were, 9 trucks lined up beside the road, and now there are 2 or 3. And, but, you know, pretty steady people, not very many snowmobiles crossing. There was one group of people who, there was somebody with I don't know, an all-terrain vehicle of some sort. But the ice was very soft, and so they were making huge gouges in the ice. But I went down and talked with them, and they were quick to tell me that they had gone around the field because they came in through Martin Corner Road, that they went around the field as opposed to going across it. Because I said I'd been there and there was plenty of snow for a snowmobile, but you know, how was that vehicle dealing with it? No, they went around the field, but I haven't been over to check. And then some other people dashed through one of our fields on High Street where nobody's ever dashed before. And you know, I took down the license number, and I don't know what I'll do about it, but not much. But I did put up a sign, access by permission only, because I didn't like the way they just crashed through the field and then crashed over the bank into the pond. In some kind of vehicle that it had tires. It was not a snowmobile.
Yeah, I saw the tire tracks. It looked like they were ATV tracks on the ice. And that was just a few days ago, right? Or
this was about a week and a half ago. The one that came, both, because they came on the same Sunday. It wasn't last Sunday; it was the Sunday before, and they went across one of the fields that are between our house and the Four Corners, sort of the middle field, and not the one with the road on it, but they crashed down over the bank, and you know, I thought that was just, so I stuck a sign up and I took down their license number. But then there was this other group, and I do know their names, and they came in with an ATV, but they said they went around the field, and I didn't say very much about it because, you know, hopefully, I think I should go over and check and see what the effect of on the field is. But hopefully there was enough snow so it didn't bother it.
I saw the remnants of a deer kill near where the snowmobile trail goes up to the fields.
Martin Corner.
Other side of the pond, not by the Four Corners, but the
Martin Corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that corner, and there are a lot of coyote tracks around that and fox tracks.
Oh, really?
Well,
I haven't been over there.
Yeah.
But I think I should get over there because I want to find out, you know, the effect, because I do happen to know the people. Who's that? What lovely noise.
That's tight.
Can we see?
I also wanted to mention one more thing at Coleman Pond. It looks like there is a beaver trap in place near the Beaver Lodge that's at the foot of the other bay of Coleman Pond. So it would be the western bay.
Near Jay's house.
Yes. Yep. And I haven't seen that there before.
There has been a trapper in the past in Black Pond, and I don't know about that.
Okay.
But maybe Rich and Lisa, you could, if you have a chance, have your mooring committee ask if Jay knows anything about beaver trapping.
Okay.
I think it's perfectly legal, but it was
It
just
is perfectly legal.
interesting to see. Yeah. And for Levenseller Pond, there just continues to be ice fishing there almost constantly.
Well, the access is so terrific there.
Mhm.
You
I
know,
think
it
that's why
really
they
is good.
stock with so many fish. There's a sign on the shore saying that the state is trying out an experiment that they put in brood lake trout from the hatcheries that are 10 pounds plus fish. And they want
Whoa.
how they do and whether fishermen are able to catch them. They couldn't possibly survive over the summer, but it would be a thrill for.
Well, no wonder they're all out there. The signs actually say that.
Yes, and they say
I'm going to
that,
stop the next time I go tomorrow.
Yeah, take a look at the sign, and they ask people to report them if they catch them, and if they don't report them, they won't repeat the experiment.
Tom, 10 pounds is a big fish.
For a small pond, yes.
Feed the whole family.
Well, I mean, it would look well on your dining room table for dinner.
Yeah, you'd have a taxidermist mount it or something.
I
I would
noticed
eat it.
a note, there was a notification from Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to, on, I think, most ponds in Maine, not to release the big fish, but to take them and consume them.
Mhm.
Oh, so they're doing it in other places.
Technically, no.
Well, it's making room for the fishery. It's for the spectrum of ages and sizes.
Yeah, it would overwhelm the pond.
Interesting.
They didn't put them in Moody, did they?
No, they
No.
didn't.
Why would they put them in? Because Levenseller is so popular?
Right, and it's such easy access. It's, almost
Yeah.
like handicap access, and they really want to open up the fishery to as many people as they can.
So it's great, yeah.
Gary, what's to keep a person from driving right on the pond and putting their vehicle and their trap right next to the vehicle?
You can't, it's the bank of there's no access.
Yeah, you might be able to do it from that first parking lot, but not
But it would be
from
tough.
the others. It would be tough, yeah. It's you'd need a good sized truck to do it, a car.
An ATV could do it, but not a truck.
We've seen that in past years. We've seen that on Coleman.
Mhm.
What?
Uh,
Trucks.
A pickup will drive right out in the middle of the pond and scatter a bunch of traps around, and then he or she sits there and.
Well, where did they come from? I mean, they must get permission from somebody because there's no public access, is there, on Coleman?
Well, there are a lot of driveways that you could drive. I'm not sure about a lot of driveways, but there are some driveways that you would allow a vehicle with high road clearance to drive right onto the ice.
Uh-huh.
Not sure where they come from, to tell you the truth, but I've seen them.
And the person, I mean, the house may be empty and people just drive
Yeah.
in there.
Yes.
Right. Interesting.
Well, let's move on to our other agenda items. We could talk about Phragmites and the next steps there. I thought the meeting went well with the select board when we
Mhm.
Oh,
told
yeah.
them what we're doing. Thanks for all of you who watched and listened. I got the
Mhm.
sense coming out of the meeting that they're supportive of what we're doing and would be supportive of getting the permit to do the work for
Mhm.
an additional 2 years. I've done some follow-up with the state. I spoke to Nancy Olmsted of the natural, what is it? It's in the Department of Agriculture and Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. And she's an invasive plant specialist, to get some of her thoughts on what we might want to do and how we might want to approach it. And then today I got a call back from the DNR talking to Jamie O'Neill, who is the woman who we spoke to last July, who worked out the permit that we didn't have to pay for, the one-time permit.
Okay.
And I let her know that it went well and that we'd be applying for a permit by rule permit for this year. And so she gave me the information that we would need to pull that together. And it doesn't seem as though it's going to be too difficult to do. It can be filed online this year. It requires taking a picture of the site, having a map outlining where it is and how they could come to check on it if they did, and then a short description of what we plan to do. And it also requires a permit fee of $256, which would be for a 2-year period. So I think that that's something that we ought to try to work on and get in while we still have money left in this year's budget. I think
What was the
that,
name of the- excuse me, you mentioned Nancy Olmsted from Agriculture and Forestry, and then somebody else.
Jamie, which is JMI McNeil.
Okay, and she is, that's,
She's with the DEP,
okay.
and she gave us some advice on filing our permit application. And you probably don't need to go into any more detail than that. So I can work on pulling together that permit application. I am technologically challenged to some degree, so I may need some help in pulling it together. If anyone wants to offer to help with that, if I end up running into problems compiling the package to send in. But if not, I can work it out. And I know that Cheryl is good with that kind of thing too. So I could probably turn to her for some help if need be.
Help you too.
Okay,
I'll help.
thanks.
And what about the release? Did we decide whether there should be a telephone number? I mean, I think we wait on the release. We're not going to send it out now.
Yeah,
But
I think
did David look at it and opine as to
no, he hasn't yet. But I guess they saw that in their package that was missing information, but we can go back to him and ask him. And I was thinking in terms of the timing for the press release, maybe it makes sense for us to release that once we get the permit for the new work.
Yeah,
It would be
I
an
think that's a good
announcement
idea.
of that, and that might be good
But
timing, and we can consult with David at that point. Do others agree that that is a good way to approach the press release?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we need somebody who's going to talk to the press. And Gary, I almost think that you're the best person. But I think that a telephone number at the or an email at the town, and then you return the call, because I don't think your private number should be used.
Okay, I'll talk to.
Because you're the
David
most
about that.
knowledgeable about things.
Well, I think we've got a lot of knowledgeable people on the committee. Susan's done a lot of research as well. I really like the materials that she sent from sitting in on that webinar. And my guess is that she knows a whole lot more than I do now about controlling Phragmites just from hearing all the people speak there. I was really impressed by the materials they put together. It also made me think that we've got a daunting task ahead of us if we think we're going to be able to actually eradicate it through our hand control methods.
Well, hopefully it'll work.
Yeah, a
Well,
lot
maybe
of
we could have the two of you, and we could have a central email, and then, spread the favors around, as it were.
yeah. So, yeah. So once we
And
get
I
to
would be
that
happy to check in with the town and find out who's approached them, or they could approach me, and then I'll either call you or Susan.
Okay. So as we get closer to having the press release, let's bring this up. Let's bring this up again in terms of how to cover that.
Okay. Fine.
And I guess while we're on the topic, Susan, maybe you could share with us what it was that you got out of attending the webinar.
It was fascinating. It was a very impressive assortment of people of experience and study, and the projects ranged from small projects like ours with lots of investment from volunteers to miles and miles of aerial broadcasted herbicides on at nuclear sites. So it was a real education for me to see the extent of Phragmites infestations. And it's now become such a studied thing. There's such coordinated effort. So it was so interesting to hear these people. I learned a lot, I have to say. I was overwhelmed with lots of information. I have lots of notes, but there was one story that I remember well, and that was one of the seasoned ones, like a man who'd been working for 30 years, and he showed pictures of a project that looked a lot like ours, with photos of maybe 6 people all scattered around like we were, spaced out, and thrashing away at this great forest of Phragmites. And then they found out the next year that they were native Phragmites.
Oh, boy.
And this is early on, and this is 30 years ago.
Does that mean they were benign? It's only the Australis Phragmites that are bad?
Yeah, they were not invasive, they were native.
So they were good? Does that
But no,
mean that they're
they all
good?
came back anyway.
So you know, I had Alita McKeague, who's the invasive species person with Waldo County, take a close look at them. She's a botanist, and she did assure me that they were the right ones to remove.
I was not beginning to imply that you hadn't heard of them. No. But the story continues, so that all the Phragmites came back, fortunately, because they're native. But then the beavers came in and built a dam and flooded the whole area, and they were eradicated.
Aha! All right. Good news.
Mother Nature bats last.
But
But
other areas,
anyway, the Phragmites were good Phragmites.
yeah, but the beavers eliminated them.
Care of it, yeah. In looking at the resource materials that you sent
Phragmites
around,
were eradicated or the beavers were eradicated?
The Phragmite,
Oh, okay. I thought maybe the state is, all right. In order to
Because the
protect them.
Phragmites, if they expanded, would kill all sorts of other things, but yet they were still considered good Phragmites.
Well, I don't know. It's kind of a moot point because the beavers take care of them.
Okay.
We could
Too
cut
late at night to consider any of this.
Beaver Trap next year in the Phragmites and see what happens.
that's right, yeah.
I have
So-
to say, I'm going to confess to you all that I softened a little bit about the use of a couple of herbicides.
Oh,
There were examples where communities had cut them year after year after year, and they kept coming back and back and back. And so there are 2 methods. I'm not suggesting we do this. I'm just saying this is a method that has been adopted by people who wanted only ecological methods, not Roundup. There are 2 others. Roundup is outlawed on any state property in New York, but there's 2 others. But the method is that after they cut, they do what they call a clip and drip. They go around and they apply a drop by hand on every little sprout. So it's quite labor intensive. The other method is to bind them into a bind, like a sheaf of wheat, and cut them off, and then they can wipe the top of that stand. So it wasn't anything that, it's not aerial spray, it's not broadcasting, it's just hand applications of individual or clumps of Phragmites. And some groups, some places, I'm not suggesting we do this, I'm just saying it occurred to me that it just was apparent that some groups had found that that was the only thing that was ever going to work if they couldn't flood.
Was there a
Beaver.
chemical what was the chemical that was applied?
Well, I can tell you,
I think a
there are
lot of people
two,
use rodeo, which is the aquatic version of Roundup. And then there's one other.
Ugh,
arsenal. Have you heard of arsenal?
Mhm.
Sounds like
Arsenal.
arsenic. I think beavers sound better.
Beavers and sheep.
You know, it
Beavers.
would take a pretty good flood for our area for that to work, since we've got it climbing up the hill about 20 feet off the
Well,
ground.
maybe we should do a little construction and, have a little area.
But when I read some of the resource materials, the one that seemed most optimistic to me about the approach we're taking was the Nature Conservancy write-up, where they had references on 4 or 5 different projects where they had just done hand cutting and it had some success. But a lot of the other places said that you're not going to be able to do it just with hand cutting. They're going to have to be other things like burning or chemicals or that type of thing. To me, it seems as though we ought to try what we're doing at least for another couple of years and see what happens.
And then let the next generation worry.
Yeah, as I
Well,
know that the select board is not disposed toward using pesticide or herbicides, unless it's really necessary.
Right.
So and it's still a relatively small patch, and what we're doing anyway keeps the seed heads from developing, which achieves our objective of having it be spread to Norton Pond. So even if it isn't eradicated, if we can cut it down before the seeds.
And they stressed that, Gary, that in many of these projects, if it was a small enough area, they couldn't eradicate it, but they greatly reduced it. And in the process, over a period of time, native plants could come in.
Mhm.
So you end up with a more mixed growth than if it was just completely infested.
So what I'm thinking of doing, based on what you're saying now and what I read, is propose as part of our permit that we do something similar to what we did last year.
Mhm.
Would be to, at the end of July, to do the first cutting, and then thereafter do cutting every week or 2 weeks,
Mhm.
depending on how much growth there is, to not let it come back up and to deny those photosynthate resources to the root system. But I think I could write it up in such a way that it wouldn't necessarily tie us down to that particular schedule or approach, but say that that's our general approach. But if folks have other ideas or think that for part of it or all of it, we should start earlier in the year, and it might depend on the year too. So if it's like a very wet May and June, it would be hard to get in there and cut. Maybe you wait until you can actually get in and do the work and not be in water. But if there's the opportunity to cut it earlier, maybe that would make sense too. But
Yeah, because it might work better. It'd be good to experiment.
any thoughts, Susan, after hearing what people had to say about an approach to use? We're basically using the Connecticut protocol that Lise found, and we could reference that as our basic approach.
I think we're on the right track. It was just a bit sobering to hear that it could take 7 years,
Yeah.
and that it would be
We have time,
Yeah.
or some of us do.
Yeah. I've been working on knotweed at the duck trap. Greta and I have for about 10 years now. And this year or last year, for the first time, they finally resorted to using herbicides because it was spreading downstream all the way to Tanglewood.
Yeah.
And it just, even going out every 2 weeks, between May and September wasn't enough
Yeah.
to staunch it for 10 years.
Right.
For
And
10 years.
that's with the use of tarps in many of the areas.
Oh,
Why was it spreading downstream? Not upstream, but downstream.
Right, because
How interesting.
I guess any fragment of either the roots
I see it gets
stems
transported.
just float downstream, and it turns out that I think with knotweed, the seeds are infertile. So the only way that it really spreads is vegetatively through pieces of the stem or the roots. So if there's just erosion of the bank through the natural run of the river where the knotweed is, it'll just take really healthy chunks of roots downstream, and they'll become established.
Oh my gosh.
So some of the areas where the tarps were in place worked, and it was controlled there, but for a lot of places it didn't, or it spread out around the edges of it. So I'm just hoping we can get this Phragmites under control before it gets to that stage and before it gets into the pond.
Because then the herbicides go downriver if they're being sprayed so close to the river.
Yes, and I think that there was, I think that they were doing some injecting of it, which is similar to what Susan was talking about. So you cut the knotweed, and it's like bamboo, so there's a chain
And then
there,
squirt it.
and you can just put it in with a syringe.
But if it's so close to the shore, that can
Well,
be taken away and got into the water.
yeah, it does break down pretty quickly. It's not a persistent herbicide. So the plan is for it to be absorbed into the roots, kill the roots, and then it decays away. So ideally, that's what.
Are you in favor of this?
You have to balance.
Ian doesn't want to
you
talk
have to-
about it much.
You have to balance the risk of what impacts the herbicides may have against what impacts on the ecosystem, having corridors of the Duck Trap River lined in both sides with knotweed.
And that was happening.
And that was starting to happen, or could happen, because of the spots that we're starting to see downstream. And once you do that, it really kills the river. For example, if you don't get the erosion, you don't have the gravel available for the salmon to build their redds, to build their nest, because it's just consolidated by the knotweed. So there are tough decisions you have to make.
They sure are.
But I'm hoping we're going to be able to make headway with the hand cutting that we're doing. But we'll see. We can't be overly optimistic about it.
No.
But I think it's still worth the effort.
Those things are so tough. On my neighbor's property, he's had knotweed, and for years he would bulldoze it. He would bulldoze the section where it would come up strong, and every year it would come up strong again. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's tough stuff.
Well, we're using tarps, but we don't have a river going by. We've got a knotweed patch over on Martin Corner Road that's being tarped.
Oh, that's good. That's good. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Susan's narrative piece. We got positive feedback from the select board on that. And what I was thinking that we might want to do with that, and I want to check with Susan in particular on this, is submit it for publication in the annual report. And it would serve two purposes. It would talk about what it is that we're doing on the Lakes and Ponds Committee to deal with Phragmites, but it would also be something for the townspeople to read about participating on town committees, and to sort of sell it to them on both
And
ends.
public education about
Right.
about Phragmites.
You could read it as well. it might depend on whether or not they've got the space or whether the select board members are supportive of doing it. But I wanted to see what other people on the committee thought of doing that. I've got to submit our report from this committee to the annual report by, I think it's April 6th. And as part of that submittal, I could include Susan's piece.
Could Susan's piece be shortened a little bit for the, for publication? Because it's quite long.
I think it's nice the way it is, but if they come back and say it's too long, do you think it could be shortened, Susan? If you're supportive
Yes.
of the idea of including it?
Sure, if they say that space is limited, I could figure out a way to make it fit.
Okay,
Maybe they could
Good idea.
offer a word limit.
I think they do, don't they, Gary, on
well, so,
But this might be special.
yeah, so this one, I'd like to see this as sort of a separate standalone, and we could refer to it in our report.
Mhm.
But, they're always asking for photos and pictures. I think they're looking for content, especially some years. So it might suit their needs to have it.
The other possibility is, I think it should go in the town report, but another possibility would be to take some of our resources and make a separate standalone flyer that could be available in the town office. I don't think that would reach as many people, but it would
Mhm.
serve the same purpose.
Yeah. It'd just be a sheet of paper that they, in the place where their handouts.
And
For
are we
people to
talking
take.
about Diane O'Brien also?
Now, that's what I was going to say, because your article is so like Diane. Have you spoken to her about it, Susan?
No, I was waiting. I
Right.
was waiting for
Yeah.
the committee. But those are all possibilities. So I was really, as Tony said, it was a way of trying to show how, an ordinary citizen could get involved in a committee, how they work, try to break it down a little bit, and then, narrate, what our project's like, hoping for a little entertainment quality there. But,
Mhm.
if let's offer it to the town, and if I'm happy to reduce it. I believe in having everything be fit on one page. And then if that's not a possibility, then take it to Diane O'Brien.
Okay. That sounds like a good plan to me.
Yeah. I think
I love the idea. I love the idea that Susan, connecting being on a town committee and doing the Phragmites thing, because you signed up to be on this committee and you end up in the hot sun with a machete. So I think it's perfect.
Instead of
there's-
cooling it by a lake.
Right.
Yes, yeah,
Well, and pay attention to invasives. I mean, that's been
Yeah.
a topic for years now, and this is, it's in town, and, it should shake people up a little bit to know what's going on. So
Yeah.
that's great.
We can recruit lots of people with machetes.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing, whether or not we're at the point where we can have more volunteer help during this season. I'm not sure we're going to be quite right with COVID to be able to do that this year, but I would expect, hopefully, next year that we would, but we could monitor that too. Maybe by August,
Most people will be vaccinated.
yeah, we can see what the recommendations of the state are at that point.
so. The only
Right.
thing I wonder about the town report is, do people read it very much? And would Diane O'Brien be a better vehicle to get the story out?
Oh,
I think it's good to
Both.
have it in the
both,
Yeah.
the
I
town
think it would be
report.
good to
Both,
try to do both,
both,
Could be both.
yeah.
both.
but probably have it be in the town report first.
Yeah.
And
First.
then she could, use that as,
Unless they don't want it.
right.
I think the town report would serve it a sort of clinical purpose, but the narrative is such a nice narrative, and the writing is so
Yeah,
lively and offers such traction, that to shrink that to just the facts is a pity. And I
Yeah,
think
because then it becomes a press release.
yes, I
Yes.
think it would engage people's interest. The story would engage people's interest, not just the facts. So I'm
Right.
hoping that Diane will present it in full, and then perhaps we publish it in a flyer for the town. I think all are good possibilities.
Okay,
If it appeared in the report that it would be somewhat official, and then Diane could make a, make a riff out of it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
good. I guess the other piece that we presented to the select board was Cheryl's sign. And I think we got a positive comment on that as well. So I think that that's something worth working on and being able to spend some of this year's budget so
Yeah.
that we can post that at the time we're actually doing our work. And maybe we can talk to Cheryl some about following up on that.
She thought it would cost about $50,
Okay,
Good.
if I remember correctly, but I guess the town would have to okay it to put it up.
yeah, I would think so. So I guess we'd have to come up with a final version of it,
What it looks,
run it by David, see if he thinks that it's necessary to run it by the select board again,
yeah,
and have an estimate as to what the cost will be, and then go forward with it if it gets approved.
well, they seem to approve of everything we were doing. And very pleased with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, Gary, I want to thank you again for your presentation to the select board.
Yeah.
It was really good job.
Good job.
Definitely.
We were very proud.
Yeah,
Very proud.
Our
we
chair,
cheered.
our chair.
it was all your good work.
Not to take anything away from you, Gary, but we are also fortunate in having a receptive
Yes,
select board.
Yes.
I can't imagine, even with your abilities, that what you had to say would have been as welcome 10 years ago.
oh, I agree. That makes all of the difference in the world. They were receptive. It's really a good group of people. You know, I've been taking a look at the new materials that come out for the select board meetings, and they're really interesting to look at now. You know, they're available online, and it's Josh that really made that happen. But it seems like every single vote is a 5-0 vote. So I
Excellent.
think that they are working together well. They're on the same page together, and that makes it less likely that they're going to give somebody a hard time because they are kind of all together. So that, you know, there isn't the sort of partisanship that you see in some other places.
Yes.
But the thing that prepared me for this was the congressional testimony that I've done over the years to the Senate and the House. And this is in some ways more challenging, but not with this group.
Because you have to live with these people. That's the difference.
That's true. That's true. The other thing is I did my budget presentation to the budget committee and the select board. I guess it was a couple of days after the select board meeting. And they seem to be supportive of the things that we had in the new budget. There really aren't comments, or they really don't vote at that point. They just hear you out. There was just one question, and it was from Jordan, and Parker, or something Parker is his last name. I don't have it.
Bennett, I think.
Okay. And
Bennett Parker.
and he had one question, and that was, if when you do the Norton Pond monitoring, when we see exceedances at the beach,
Right.
and And if you're trying to distinguish human origins to the E. coli as opposed to animal origins, and I had talked about that during my presentation, that
Yeah.
What we're doing in terms of trying to identify where it might be coming from is the first step. The next step is to determine whether it's human or animal based. He asked, what would it cost to do that? And do you have enough money in your budget to make that happen? So I've spent the last week trying to research that question. And I've finally come up with some numbers. It looks like it's pretty expensive. It might be $250 to $300 per sample, and you might need several samples. And it depends on what kinds of organisms or what kind of animals you might be looking for. And the labs are, the lab that I found is in Florida, and it would have to be shipped down. So there's a lot to that. And it's probably not something that could be included at this point in the budget, but it looked like there would be support from him to do additional work and potentially support the town paying for some of that. So when we come to that bridge, we may have some support for it. Now that I'm
Good.
pulling that information together, I'm going to get it back to him. So they might make a recommendation to increase our budget some to allow us to do that kind of monitoring if it was appropriate after we did the first step of trying to find out whether or not there's more E. coli coming down the brook that goes under the.
But it would be McGunnicook Watershed people who would, the association would be doing the monitoring, right?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. So
Mhm.
we is that group.
Right. Or we might assist them in some way
Yeah.
if they needed
Yeah.
some help, but they would take the lead on it.
Right.
I'd want to work very closely with Paul on
Right.
it.
So Gary, does that mean you can say, all right, there are a lot of geese up there,
Mhm.
and you could just get a water sampling that did human or geese? If you
Yeah.
could be that
that's right.
specific, or there's some beaver up there, the beaver
Yeah.
dam.
So they use the PCR technique, which is the same technique that they use for DNA analysis, and they've been using for the COVID analyses that they've been doing in sewer systems at colleges and that kind of thing. So it's relatively sensitive. What it does is it takes the DNA that's in the water and it multiplies so that they can actually read the DNA, and they can associate it with different species, whether it's a canine or a beaver or a bird. And there are sort of two ways of doing it. One will just tell you whether or not there's that DNA in the sample at all without giving you quantitatively how much there is. But for extra money, you can get something quantitative, which is more useful because it would tell you that this is 90% bird and 10% human or something like that. But it gives you some indication of where it might be coming from. And just because it's animal or bird doesn't mean that you don't have a problem, but it's a different kind of problem that you're dealing with at a swimming area.
Right.
So if it's human, then it means you probably have a leaking septic system of some kind, which will put you on a different track than what you might do if it's animal based. So if it's animal based, you might want to proactively have an advisory at a beach that says that people shouldn't swim if you've had a rain event where there's been, say, more than an inch of rain, because that's the kind of thing that might carry giardia or something from a beaver to the beach. So it doesn't mean, again, it would just mean that you would take a different approach to it, but it would give you some of that information.
Thank you.
And it's all this stuff ends up being more complicated. So it was kind of like a simple question. How much would it cost to, do this additional sampling? But you really have to design an appropriate kind of program, do it in the right place and at the right time, have a representative number of samples, making sure that you get the quantitative results and not just the qualitative results, if that's what you're after.
And it has to rain.
And then it has to rain too, so that we can see it, right? Right.
Well, it sounds like the cost of the test, whatever it is, $250 or something, is one part of it, but there's a good deal of footwork that has to happen before that. to
Right, some good
where to
planning.
do it, when to do it.
You got to figure out just how many samples you'd need to be representative. So I don't think it would be a single sample, and it might not be a single sample on a single day. So it might be the kind of thing that the town would want to go after a grant,
Yeah.
for several $1,000s, and maybe have it be administered by the state or some other organization. I think if we do it, it would be important to do it right.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's a discussion for another meeting.
Yes.
But it does sound like the select board would not close the door on that automatically.
I should think they'd want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
and-
would think so too. At least this particular select board, if they, like you were saying, they seem to be supportive of this kind of thing. Now, I've noticed that there's something in the budget that gets carried from year to year to year that's called the Norton Pond study. And evidently, they appropriated some money or got a grant a number of years ago to start looking at the Norton Pond problem, but didn't spend all of the money for it.
Uh-huh.
So I want to talk to Dave Kinney about that. I just saw that in the budget and find out what that is and how it could be used, and maybe it could be used for this purpose.
Mhm.
And I do think Jordan is interested because he asked at the meeting that we attended, he asked this question 2 times, and then at the budget meeting.
I wish you safe travels.
I'll talk to you later,
When do you leave for the airport tomorrow?
the next day.
You can mute yourself, Tony.
What's that happening?
Well, my son just FaceTimed me from Colorado.
Oh, okay, okay,
Nonsense. I told
You
him
just hit the mute button.
okay, good.
I was at a meeting.
So is there anything else that we need to cover tonight?
Gary,
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that earlier today I was I went up to Hancock to visit my spouse, and we were walking. We like to go down to Sorrento and walk on the harbor there. It's very beautiful. And at the town landing, there were 8 new floats that the town will be putting in the harbor that they rent out. And they all had unencapsulated blue styrofoam. They're brand new expensive floats that the town bought. And I was just horrified. It's like, didn't anybody tell them this isn't okay? And this is a very wealthy harbor. They have a lot of money. And they're putting those brand new things in the water.
That's a
Did you
shame.
tell them? Did you tell them?
Well, I don't think I get to talk to anybody in Sorrento about anything, but I was just kind of appalled
Mm,
that there are people that people are still doing it.
Yeah,
Amazing.
And there was to replace old falling apart floats with the
Styrofoam.
crumbling
that's
blue
crazy.
styrofoam.
Yeah.
Someone-
Yeah, I took pictures of them, and TJ said, like, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know. It's just, I'm upset.
Anything else?
Well, I'm just so
Well, it was a
disappointed.
good
that-
meeting. Thank you all.
Just so
Well, just
disappointed that-
one other thing, and that
Yeah.
is there any follow-up that we want to do with respect to what we heard from Paul Leeper? And is that an agenda item that we want to discuss next time around?
I would like to discuss the whole 200 feet gallon jug thing.
Okay.
And there's been
Yeah.
no action on the ordinance drafting yet. We're sort of waiting to have a meeting scheduled.
Okay,
We've done some research and I think we're kind of happy possibly with the new Harrison ordinance and model something on that, but I think we have to put our heads together. But I think it's good to have it in the meeting, in the minutes, that about the ordinance drafting. That we're on top of it and the committee's following it, and that, there's movement. Would you agree, Rich? Anything more to add?
Absolutely. It really does look like we're not going to be able to do designated common mooring zones, dealing with our attorney and all the stipulations that have to be done if we try to do it, but still protecting that first 100 feet and having some regulations for permitting of moorings by non-shorefront owners does seem like a way of managing it pretty well at this point.
So Harrison seems to have an ordinance that we kind of like. So I think we'll
Mhm.
hopefully be modeling it along that, the new ordinance.
Okay,
But one thing I was really glad that Paul said, he was talking about the shapes of Pitcher and Coleman and that they're too narrow to really have a large mooring field.
We don't have the people either, Whitney.
What?
I said, we don't have the people either.
No, we don't.
yeah,
We don't, but
you're pretty protected.
Because you have no public access.
Yeah,
no, I know, but the fact that the individual ponds and lakes in Lincolnville are recognized by Paul, who has a vast knowledge of all of them, is
Helpful.
very positive to me,
Mhm.
from my point of view.
Agreed.
Yes.
Well,
well, shall we adjourn the meeting, or is there anything else that anyone would like to bring up?
just very quickly, I found it very interesting to learn that Lincolnville has an inland harbor master who is authorized to negotiate these things.
Yeah, I did too. And that's one of the things I wanted to bring up. I didn't want to bring it up tonight, but at the next meeting,
Yeah.
the fact that we have that is at least something that
Yes.
we can potentially use in the interim, especially if there's something flagrant with respect to how someone is positioning a houseboat or, or putting in a mooring in a way that interferes with the use of other people's boats. Or
Nesting loons.
some damage to the shoreline or erosion or something along those lines. And maybe that's, at least something in the interim, and it might actually be something that could work longer term too. But I think that would be a good discussion to have.
We might
Good.
want,
Gary, could we have him come to a meeting? Could we have him
That's
attend a meeting?
Yeah,
And because a lot of people don't know that we have that person or how to get a hold of him or when and what he can do if he does.
Well, he's a full-time
Come.
detective, so he does this on his off hours.
Yeah.
Ah,
We could do that. I would want to be prepared for that.
He's
meeting.
not full-time.
So maybe when we have the discussion next time, we could make a decision about inviting him and what it is specifically that we would like him to address. And maybe we could bring up the question of his authority as the inland harbor master to manage floats and docks and moorings and that kind of thing, whether he's open to it, whether he thinks it's feasible, whether he truly thinks he has the authority. I thought it was kind of soft, the way that Paul was talking about it, and that actions could be probably challenged.
Unless he has an ordinance.
Right. If there's an ordinance.
Unless there is the ordinance. So I think you can only take it so far, but I think exploring those kinds of questions with him would be worthwhile. But let's,
So you have to wonder, Rich, whether we should be having Justin at our meetings of the ordinance committee.
Well, I've asked Jay to invite him to our next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Justin, I just want to say, our experience on Coleman Pond, he's dynamite. He doesn't go in with a heavy hand, but he's firm
He's
and,
wonderful.
and he gets results.
Mhm.
Doesn't need to arrest anybody, but that doesn't happen again.
Well, he can do that too.
Yes, but he's got the authority to do that. So it's like speak
God.
softly, but carry a big stick, right?
Exactly.
We can show him our support.
Yes.
That was my second presidential quote of the night. And at that,
Okay.
and for Tony's sake, I want to note the time that we're adjourning this meeting. It's
Oh,
56, Tony.
It's 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
3 minutes to
56.
9.
Okay, we got it in under 2 hours. Thank you all very much. It's always great.
Thank
to see you.
you. Bye.
Thanks, Gary.
Oh, yeah,
Good
and,
night.
the date of the next meeting will be the 4th Tuesday,
Written down on my page. It's the 23rd.
the 23rd.
Same
Okay,
date because February and March match this year,
Yes.
Good.
which is kind of deja vu.
Yeah.
February
Yeah.
has 28 days, exactly 4 weeks. That's what does it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Seeing you.